Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, maybe even for those of you who are joining us after work. My name is Marek Zemanik. I'm the CIPD's Senior Public Policy Advisor for Scotland and Northern Ireland. I'm here to talk to you today about our manifesto for the Northern Irish Assembly election. Now, unfortunately, this is just a recording, so I will not be able to answer any questions of yours in real time, but please, as I always like to emphasize, if you ever do have any questions, do not hesitate to drop us an email, send us a message on social media, contact me directly, and I will make sure to respond to any comments or queries or questions. Now, as I say, I'm here to talk today about our manifesto for the Northern Irish Assembly election. Now, that election is now only a few weeks away, rather unbelievably. But I think it's fair to say that this election will be held under a completely unprecedented cloud of uncertainty, and that's even in the context of Northern Irish politics. Certainly the last 2 years will very likely be remembered as one of the most turbulent ones in recent memory, but of course there's a few specific reasons for why this is even more unusual in Northern Ireland than in the rest of the UK, primarily because of the UK's departure of the European Union and then the operation of the Northern Irish Protocol in particular. Now, neither the pandemic nor the operation of the protocol are issues that have completely gone away, so the uncertainty is still very much there. And I think we know that political parties will have to recognize this in their manifesto. Certainly some of it has become part of the political campaign as well. But manifestos will have to be a mixture of short-term policy responses to sort of mixed in with a sort of a longer-term vision. Now, what we're seeking to do with our manifesto, which is a series of public policy asks, is to help policymakers from all political parties in this task. And what we say in our manifesto very clearly is that actually our profession is best place to do that. Of course, it was people, professionals, that had to navigate all these unprecedented changes to working patterns, get to grips with ever-changing regulations and support schemes, and be there for their employees and look after their well-being through some of the most difficult times they have ever faced. So what we're saying is use this experience, both good and bad, to guide you and to help with public policy. What we're trying to do here is to provide a helping hand to those who are writing the manifesto. Our manifesto has now gone through all the political parties. We look forward to discussing it with the political parties as well and see some of our public policy asks reflected in the manifestos. Now, the asks are grouped around three specific chapters. I would say they cover the sort of three areas where the discussions that we had as part of this process that was sort of most focused on. We held a series of roundtables. We also had a few surveys that some of you may have responded to, of course, as well. And we grouped all these policy asks into three chapters. The first one is all about job quality. Second one is all about skills development, and then the third one is about the labour market more broadly and employment law, since this is an area that's actually devolved to Northern Ireland uniquely out of all the nations of the UK. Needless to say, the last 2 years have certainly been incredibly challenging, but as we say, with every challenge comes an opportunity to change. And that's what we are trying to lay out in our manifesto. So let me just dive straight in. The first chapter, job quality in a changing world, is what we decided to call it. Now, while we talk about job quality, and I keep repeating this, and if you've seen me before talking about job quality, you will have heard this. Why do we talk about job quality? Well, it's because it's our purpose. It's the CIPD's purpose, championing better work and working lives. And of course, job quality covers lots of different things, from pay and benefits through health and well-being, things like job security, as well as skill development opportunities, job design. It's quite a broad concept. And when you think about it, all the issues that have come to the fore over the last 2 years during the pandemic are actually linked to job quality. Worries about whether you're going to lose your job or not, the furlough scheme, job security, work-life balance, and of course, at its very basic, health and well-being. Those are all crucial elements of job quality. So our argument is, it makes sense for job quality to remain at the center of the debate when it comes to our recovery from the pandemic. Job quality has become a bit more important over the last few years. Governments across the UK and also regional administrations, the Scottish government or some of the more regional devolved structures in Manchester or Liverpool started focusing on job quality as a way to, yes, improve job quality for employees, but also recognizing that job quality can lead to productivity improvements for businesses as a whole. Now, since we know about the productivity challenges, especially so in Northern Ireland, which has long been probably the worst performer on productivity across the UK. And given there is increasing evidence about how job quality can help productivity, it does make sense for job quality to be the focus of public policy. So our first sort of overarching recommendation is to simply embed job quality across everything that a Northern Irish executive does. Now, of course, robust policy work relies on data and relies on evidence. Now, Northern Ireland has its own statistical research agency, NISRA, and actually, it has to be said, to be fair, it is actually further ahead than other parts of the UK when it comes to job quality. It has included a job satisfaction variable in its labour force survey since 2018, publishes regular work quality bulletins, and frankly, the ONS could learn something from NISRA in this regard as well. So our second recommendation is to make sure that the executive keeps supporting NISRA in any way it needs to be supported to complete its job quality measuring framework, so that the evidence and the data is there to guide policy work in the future as well. One of the sort of most significant bits of public policy that certainly we have contributed to in the context of Northern Ireland is the newly published skills strategy, which is out for consultation a few months ago. And one of the probably most eye-catching proposals in there was the plan to introduce what's called a Better Jobs Pledge by the Department for the Economy, which is a simple idea of trying to link public money, so various grants or business support, perhaps even procurement, depending on how it's designed, linking that to certain job quality metrics by businesses. I mean, this is to be targeted at larger businesses as well, but it's simply trying to I guess mimic or mirror what the Scottish government has been doing through its Fair Work First agenda as well. Now we have a lot of experience, a lot of evidence around such schemes. So we'd be keen to work with the department, and we have said this to the department, have discussed this with the department as well. And we do think that a well-designed pledge like this could make a difference, but it's important that there are no gaps, that it's supported well, that it's targeted appropriately, and of course it doesn't doesn't cause any unintended consequences. The danger is there, of course. So that's the third recommendation, is to simply work with us and introduce a well-designed and well-supported Better Jobs pledge. Now, of course, if we really want to shift the dial on job quality, we need to make sure that it's the private sector that buys into this and buys into the agenda. Now, we know from discussions is that, you know, some of our most active members will be well aware of what job quality is and what those various elements of job quality mean, and how they can change it, and what impact that might be, what impact it might have. But we also know that there's a large section of, especially the private sector, of employers, particularly probably difficult for some of the smallest businesses as well, who simply don't know what steps they should take to try and improve job quality. What are some of the practical things that need to change and need to be done? How can I even assess in the first place whether the jobs in my organization would be classed as good jobs, and how can I improve them? So there's a real gap there when it comes to providing information, providing some support. So what we're saying in our manifesto is that we think that there should be a large job quality campaign purely as an information campaign to be able to signpost businesses to resources that can make a real difference. Now, the other thing we speak about is, of course, flexible work. The last 2 years have been described as a sort of largest home working experiment ever seen in this country. But as we keep emphasizing, home working is not the same as flexible working. We know that not all jobs can be done from home. Not everybody has the ability to work from home, and nor does everybody want to work from home as well. So it's very important that we focus on other parts of flexible working as well. And we know that, you know, over the last 2 years, while home working has increased, actually the dial has barely shifted when it comes to all the other flexible work options, compressed hours or turn time working or flexi time, etc. And some of these options actually might be much more suitable and actually much more wanted and desired by certain employees. And usually flexi time is actually the one that comes out on top when you ask people what flexible working arrangements they would like. Now, as I mentioned, Northern Ireland does have employment law powers, and one of the things that the UK government is currently consulting on, it's been a long-standing campaign of the CIPD, is the right to request flexible working to become a day one right. And the UK government is consulting on this. We know that the pace of change in Northern Ireland can sometimes lag behind a little bit. So we are highlighting this straight away, that the right to request flexible working should become a day one right in Northern Ireland as well. In addition to this, we also talk about introducing a flexible work challenge fund. This is purely to try and encourage a bit more creative thinking, to show that businesses can approach this creatively and can accommodate flexible working, even in areas and sectors that traditionally were a bit more reluctant to flexible working. The challenge fund would purely be there to try and provide a little bit of investment to pilot certain approaches and then spread any findings and any conclusions throughout the economy. The other thing we speak about, actually the last section in this chapter, is the importance of management skills. Now, I mentioned the productivity challenge in Northern Ireland. Latest statistics show something like 20% lower than the UK average for productivity in Northern Ireland. Of course, we still don't know the full impact of the pandemic on productivity. But what we do know is that what research tells us about some of the drivers of productivity, capital investment, business innovation, skills development, etc. But more recently, we talk about job quality, and especially we talk about people management and its impact on productivity. Now, our most recent report in Northern Ireland, called Working Lives Northern Ireland, which was all about job quality, makes it actually quite clear and shows how good management actually impacts on employees' job quality. We know that the skills strategy, for example, also recognizes the importance of management skills, but also highlights that the current existing support is quite patchy, only provided to a very small, specific group of companies. And this is something that actually does need to improve, especially when it comes to some of the smallest of businesses. This is something that can, for example, help boost demand for skills, which is very, very important for skills development, upskilling, lifelong learning, something I'm going to talk about a little bit later. One of the things we do mention in Manifesto, and this is the last recommendation in this chapter, is to try and roll out what we call a people skills program across Northern Ireland. And this is something that we ran as a pilot some time ago, where CIPD qualified professionals would provide some free one-to-one advisory support to some of the smallest businesses. Now, those pilot schemes that existed across the UK in the last few years, they were extremely popular. The take-up of the services considerably exceeded expectations. And a sort of independent evaluation also concluded that it was a highly, highly effective operating model. So this is all about providing some of the most direct people management support to some of the smallest companies who very often will not have any sort of in-house HR support. Now, something like this could make a real difference because it targets those areas and those businesses where there are the sort of the biggest gaps. So that's the last recommendation in this chapter. The second chapter in the manifesto is called Flexible and Responsive Skills Development. There's quite a few recommendations in this. I will not read out everything word for word in this, but I just want to give you a flavor of what we ask for. Now, this is all based on the conversations that we've had in the run-up to this, to the election and to the manifesto being published. Broadly speaking, we speak about trying to reevaluate three different kinds of balance here. First of all, is the balance between vocational and academic skills development. We know that certainly over the last sort of 2 decades at least, all areas of the UK have tended to favor the latter, i.e. focus on academia, focus on pushing pupils into higher education, but also in terms of the sort of levels of funding that are being committed to higher education versus, let's say, further education or any sort of technical routes like apprenticeships, etc. The second kind of balance we talk about is the balance between adult and youth skills development. Again, the vast majority of funding in Northern Ireland, not just in Northern Ireland, elsewhere in the UK as well, is very much front-loaded, aimed at youth skills development, which, of course, on one hand is understandable. But given some of the looming economic transitions that we are facing, not least towards green technologies and away from sort of carbon-based industries, we know a lot more emphasis needs to be given to sort of upskilling, reskilling, lifelong learning. The third kind of balance we talk about is the balance between these sort of long courses leading to qualifications, year-long, 2-year-long, 4-year-long courses that lead to certain qualifications, and then sort of shorter, flexible, buildable routes to two qualifications as well. Now, if we are to have a greater emphasis on lifelong learning, well, that's something that will need to be coupled with a different approach to skills development, when people will have to upskill either during, alongside work or out with work, balancing that with their own personal lives. So these are sort of just three overarching principles that we speak about in the manifesto. When it comes to the specific recommendations, the first one is actually not that specific, but it's a bit more, it's a bit broader, but it's an important point, and that is all about rebalancing funding towards demand-led vocational routes, like apprenticeships, for example. We know of the value of apprenticeships. We know there is demand for apprenticeships. We know now, especially when it comes to the reported labor shortages more recently, employers are looking at apprentices and at these sort of technical skills that will be required. The recently published skills barometer, which sort of outlines where the key skills gaps are going to be, that clearly shows these sort of mid-level, level 3, 4, 5 skills will be needed in the future. And that's exactly where apprenticeships and sort of technical skills, vocational education, that's exactly where this sits. But this will not happen without more funding from the executive. And that's why we keep saying that the skills strategy has to be underpinned by proper cross-departmental work and some proper funding. Another area where funding is important is we speak about apprenticeship recruitment incentives. So there was a couple of programs put in place during the pandemic, which basically provided a grant to businesses that hired an apprentice. And we know from evidence that actually that can be a lot of dead weight there, but where we know it can make a difference is at the smallest of businesses. So I think we are arguing for an incentive scheme that is targeted at the smallest of businesses, where this can actually make a difference to a decision of a small business, whether to take on an apprentice or not. And we speak about the apprenticeship levy a little bit as well. Now, the arguments and the frustrations of employers who have to pay the levy are well rehearsed, and you will be presumably familiar with all of them. The system has been designed for very much the English skills development system. We've long been making a case, CIPD has long been making the case in England for the apprenticeship levy to be changed into a more sort of flexible training levy. I guess the frustrations in other parts of the UK, Northern Ireland, Wales, and Scotland, is that the link between paying your levy and what you get back from skills is very tenuous. Now what we are arguing for is that at the very least there should be a ring-fenced fund put in place. Something like that already exists in Scotland. We argue this is something that should exist in Northern Ireland as well, to allow apprenticeship levy payers directly tap in to a fund to access upskilling or reskilling opportunities as well, in addition to, of course, apprenticeships that they can already get some funding for. The other thing we speak about is trying to develop closer links between schools and employers. We do know this is extremely important. It came across very strongly during our evidence session here, some referring to the sort of missing bridge between school and employment. Now, some of this does happen in Northern Ireland, and our members gave us some examples of where it does happen very well locally, but we really think there's a strong case to try and make this a bit more formal across the Northern Ireland. And a range of activities could be organized like this: school presentations, work placements, etc., with benefits for both pupils and employers as well, through developing their talent pipeline as well. This is quite linked to another very, very important area where some work is actually already being done in Northern Ireland. That's around careers advice. It's very, very important that pupils, but also careers advisors have access to some clear, personalized, real-time labor market information where it can be signposted to relevant programs and get some relevant advice. There's some scary statistics out there in the skills barometer, which I just mentioned, that shows that pupils' expectations of careers are completely skewed from what the labor market will need, and also skewed away from what eventually probably does happen to these pupils. Now we know that there are gaps around the type of guidance received, around the amount of guidance received, but also around the sort of quality of the guidance as rated by those who receive this. So some work in this area is definitely needed. Now, last but not least, now I spoke about the importance of lifelong learning. And this has been an area that we've been speaking about for a long time as well. Now, of course, lifelong learning does not just depend on the availability of courses, although that's, of course, very important. It also is all about removing barriers to participation. Now, we make a few suggestions in there. One of them is to try and create some sort of a right to time off using employment law powers. So that's being able to request some leave from your employer to be able to take part in some training. However, there might be an even better option, that is to create some sort of a form of subsidy that would cover lost income whilst undergoing some training. And we know that many employers already offer time off for skills development as part of sort of their benefits package, but it can be unpaid. So for somebody to take time off and then lose income whilst going on a course, whether it's free or actually even or paid for, that is a barrier and that is a disincentive. So to try and create some sort of a targeted subsidy, targeted those who need most, you could even target it sectorally. This could make a big difference in the context of lifelong learning as well. The other thing we talk about is individual learning accounts, create some sort of a buildable system for where individuals can save up over time, think about their skills development longer term as well. We published a big report early last year called Skills to Grow, which is all about what these sort of enhanced individual learning accounts could look like. It's targeted at Scotland, but the recommendations are very much applicable to other jurisdictions as well. So we would certainly like to see them introduced in Northern Ireland as well. Now we also speak about a specific fund called Skill Up, which is a flexible skills program, something that was designed and put in place very much as a sort of thing in response to the pandemic, where employees could tap into sort of upskilling or reskilling opportunities from a range of courses. Now we strongly think that this is something that should stay permanent, primarily given the pace of economic change that we are likely to see over the next decade. Last but not least, in this chapter, we speak a little bit about soft skills, transverse skills, essential skills. In the context of Northern Ireland, it's actually called employability skills. These are the sort of skills like communication, collaboration, critical thinking, the human skills that will be so important in the future with a lot more AI and automation. Again, the skills barometer shows that this is to be extremely important in the future, and we do think that the executive has an opportunity here to create a sort of framework that is used across educational establishments, across different stages of an individual's life, and also by businesses, of course, as well, so that we know we have a clear framework in mind to work off of and work towards to improve these skills. I'm taking a lot longer than I anticipated with this. So if you're still with me, well done, and thank you for sticking with it. The very last chapter that I'm speaking about is called a modern, inclusive labor market. Of course, many of the day-to-day issues that you as CIPD members have to navigate are linked to a sort of legislative and regulatory employment framework in Northern Ireland, and much of this is very much under direct control of the executive. It's come across very, very strongly in our evidence sessions in the run-up to this, that our members feel that employment law has to stay nimble, and has to stay proportionate, and has to stay up to date. I think the feedback that we've received can probably be summarized by saying that they feel equalities law and employment law is a bit more fragmented, and it could benefit from being consolidated, updated, to sort of reflect the broader diversity in the Northern Irish workforce. We also know that the growing divergence, and therefore complexity of navigating the growing divergence between GB and NI employment legislation, is now becoming a significant burden. Now, there may be a case for some areas of differentiation, of course, but it's also important to emphasize that some of this divergence is very much accidental, and it is purely the result of the collapse of the Assembly and Executive in 2017. So there's quite a few sort of technical, but with a real impact on the work of our members. So our key recommendation here is to bring forward a new employment bill to try and consolidate employment law and ideally equalities law as well, where appropriate. Now, we know there's more stuff coming down the line from the UK government in this area. There's an employment bill been promised a couple of years ago, and we always are told that it's just around the corner, but it might bring some significant changes to things like employment status. So this is certainly something that the executive will need to stay very, very cognizant of to ensure that the divergence does not grow even further and deeper. Now, when speaking about equalities law, we also spoke about things like pay gap reporting. Of course, this is an area where Northern Ireland was set to lead the rest of the UK, when in 2017 gender, ethnicity and disability pay gap reporting was legislated for, but it's actually a provision that has never been enacted. Now, there are moves afoot to try and change this in the rest of the UK as well, but our members said it very clearly they would like to see these provisions enacted in Northern Ireland. There might be an opportunity for Northern Ireland to lead the way. And this could be done in the sort of new employment bill. It could be done, of course, independently of it as well. The other area we mentioned in there is paid bereavement leave, because this is something that we've campaigned on quite strongly. Only very recently, the final stage of the parental bereavement leave and pay bill was completed in the Assembly, which now brings the Assembly in line with the rest of the UK by giving employees the right to 2 weeks off if their child dies. Now, we make the case in the rest of the UK for GB law as strongly as we make it in Northern Ireland as well. We really do think that this should just be the minimum legislated for, and that the executive should go further and make paid bereavement leave available to all employees bereaved of a close relative. And we also talk about introduction of paid carers leave. This is an area, again, where Northern Ireland employees face fewer entitlements than their counterparts in Great Britain. UK government is introducing an extra week of leave for unpaid carers. Again, we think this should go further and be paid, and it should be mirrored in Northern Ireland as well. Now we also talk about the carers allowance a little bit. Carers allowance is probably the key sort of benefit being paid to unpaid carers. One of the things that has come across during our evidence sessions is that one of the rules for carers allowance, which is the 21 hours study rule, which means that you cannot study for longer than 21 hours before you lose your entitlement to carers allowance. That is preventing some from accessing upskilling, reskilling opportunities or other sort of educational opportunities. Now we think this rule should be scrapped. Actually, we made the case in Scotland as well, where the carers allowance has been devolved to and is being replaced by the Scottish carers allowance. Only a couple of weeks ago, the Scottish government announced that one of the first things that they're suggesting is to scrap this rule. So there is precedent for it now in another jurisdiction as well, and we feel strongly that this is something that Northern Ireland could do, even irrespective of the UK government as well. Very finally, the last thing that came through, and we simply had to mention this because it was mentioned by, I think, in every roundtable that we had, and that is the huge discrepancy between the levels of childcare support that is being provided in Northern Ireland compared to the other parts of the UK, Scotland, England, and Wales. Now we know care responsibilities are huge barriers when it comes to employment or when it comes to accessing skill development opportunities. As well, pandemic has only exacerbated this as well. I think it's been estimated that women provided 2/3 more childcare than men during lockdown. This is still something that is very gendered. So in the context of diversity and inclusion as well, making sure that women can return to work, it's very important that childcare, that there is some sort of a model for funded childcare introduced in Northern Ireland. There's a range of options. We don't specify what model this should be. There's a range of options there, but it could make a real difference. Okay, and that was our 22nd recommendation. Yes, 22 recommendations for the 2022, almost accidental, for the 2022 Assembly election across 3 chapters. Thank you very much for listening. As I said, we've taken these to the political parties. Hopefully some of it will make it through. And then we'll just wait for the result, and we'll look forward to engaging with the executive in whatever shape or form it is formed. Hopefully it is formed in the first place. Thank you very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day.